So, is art something that we should just keep in a gallery or put up on a wall? I don't really think so. I think art can be so much more than this. Art can be used as a tool so we can understand ourselves and connect with others. So, how do we teach this to be a valuable tool? Well, as John says, it's a bit of an experiment here today. This is the first time I've ever narrated one of these talks myself. I've animated a lot of these before. Some of you might have seen my hairy hand before. Some of you might know my hand better than I do, but... So I'm going to tell you a story using the technique that I developed. And what I want to do is start the story by saying it was really a firm of accountants that taught me how to be an artist. And to do this, I'm going to tell you a story that takes place from Krakow to Chicago, and it involves a little bit of serendipity and nepotism. And also the fact that I'd left art college, the art college bubble, and I was thinking, what the hell am I going to do with my life? And I found myself outside the large global accounting firm in a business park in a satellite town out on the outskirts of London. And I was really green at the time. I didn't know anything about business, anything about the work environment at all, anything like that. And I seriously thought that I was there to have an interview with some guy called Ernest Young. Honestly. So I travelled there that day from a seaside town called Margate, which is on the southeast coast of England. And Margate's great because it's full of really dilapidated old buildings, which is great for artists like me who are leaving college at this time, because you can find yourself an artist studio. And my artist studio was freezing, and it was damp and cold, but very cheap, and this was great. And what I loved about Margate, other than the freezing cold damp studios, was the fact that it had really lovely seascapes. And about 200 years earlier, you might know him, he's a famous artist, J.M.W. Turner, used to live in Margate and paint in Margate, and he kept a mistress in Margate. And he went by the pseudonym of Admiral Puggy Booth. And he said to his friend, the art critic John Ruskin, the skies over Thanet, which is where Margate is, are the most beautiful in Europe. You better keep looking out to sea, John, because don't look into inland, it's horrible. But Turner was a romantic, and he was part of the romantic movement, and he would say that about the sea. He was the romantic movement. They were railing against the Industrial Revolution, which was prevailing at the time. And they were totally about the artist as the emotion and the sublimity of nature. This is what they were all about, so they were railing against the Industrial Revolution. And for me, that was a really good message. I thought, I'm an artist, I'm a poet, I'm windswept and interesting, and I'm wandering around Margate in the sea. And funnily enough, looking back on it now, this has been a template for artists since that time, since Romantic times. Van Gogh is a very interesting artist, Picasso, they've all got this blueprint cut from the same cloth as the Romantic movement. And I was basically reenacting a subcultural myth here. I really thought I was pretending to be an artist when I really didn't have any clue about what being an artist was really about. I was just living in this rundown area with quite weird people. And there was a template set out for this by artists like David Bowie and Iggy Pop, who strangely went to live in Berlin together to straighten themselves out, that really worked. And interestingly, the other week I found out that Pete Doherty and Macaulay Culkin were living together in Paris, and I think, what's happening to the world? But this has all come down from the Romantic movement. This is all about what people think artists should be doing. Another artist from Margate, Tracy Emin, I don't know if anyone knows of her. She was of the Young British Arts Movement, a friend of Damien Hirst. And what she was doing was she also was personifying this myth of the artist and making a hell of a lot of money out of it. And this all confused me at the time because I thought, what's going on? I'm an artist, I want to be an artist, and I also want to make money. I want to live, I want to be able to provide for me. And in the back of my head, my father's voice rang out. My dad's a brash northerner, and he said, what you want to do, son? Do you want to paint harbour scenes? That's what people want. And I was really I was really disillusioned by this. I thought, is this what art's all about? Is it all about painting things to go and sit behind people's soft furnishings? What's that all about? Surely there must be something more to it. And so there's an old joke that says, what do you say to an arts graduate with a job? I'll take a Big Mac and fries, please. And that's a myth of a starving artist. That's another myth, and that's a myth that came from the myth of the previous myth. And because really there was a survey in the States that was conducted over the last 10 years. It says, actually, arts graduates are finding satisfaction and jobs and versatile skills that they can employ in the marketplace. The survey also said that out of the 13,000 alumni of the 154 arts programs, 2/3 report that they had, the first job they got was actually what they studied at college, so they weren't going into just McDonald's straight away. And 6 in 10 were self-employed. 14% of those started their own companies. So it says arts graduates are actually an entrepreneurial bunch. Unfortunately, more than half reported that the careers advice they got at art college was pretty much non-existent. So we're teaching people how to come out of art college and live this subcultural myth, and then not giving them any advice about what to do with it. Sir Ken Robinson, I should prefix that, said what businesses are looking for in the future is adaptability and creativity. Now, I think that arts graduates have that in spades. I think they've totally got those abilities. So when I arrived at the global headquarters of Ernst & Young, there was an environment that I came out of the elevator, and this environment invisibly spoke to me. And then a little fella came along, and he actually spoke to me, and he said, "You must be Andrew." I said, "Well, you must be Ernest." But then his colleague popped up, and I said, "Well, are you Ernest?" And he wasn't Ernest, but he was vigorous. And he said, "Your friend Pete from the States, the nepotism thing, he says you're pretty good with a pen, you can draw. So we've invited you here, what we want you to do is draw on those walls for us." I said, "Well, what do you want me to draw?" He said, "Well, anything." And can I just ask a question to everyone here? Anyone working in an accounting firm here? Anyone? Right, when you got your job, did it involve drawing a putrid zombie holding a brain dripping with blood? No? Well, it's just me then. I got the job based on this drawing. So I said, "Great, come back next week. We've got a big event and you can take place in it." So next week I arrived, and all these people were in the space, and the environment was arranged with purpose. It was not like the week before where it was all sort of muted and the zombie thing. It was all purposeful. It was about, we're going to get some work done. And they had people reporting out on these huge curved workboards, which I found out were called radiant walls. And I thought, wow, and they were using these things called hyper tiles. These things are like fridge magnets on steroids. They whack them up on the wall. They're massive things, and people were passing information about. And funnily enough, when I was drawing this last week, I didn't really understand that there would be a ninja here in the audience. But what was happening at this environment was it was staffed by a load of knowledge ninjas. And now, the reason I say that is because they were taking information around in the environment and just whipping it around, and the client was just oblivious to this. Well, when I arrived in this environment, I felt pretty much like Jim Ladd from Treasure Island. I'd arrived here, all the pirates knew what was going on except me. And I felt a bit like a Shire horse, blinkered. They led me in, right? Don't talk to anyone. You drew the zombie last week. Don't talk to anyone. In a minute, you're going to go up there and you're going to draw on that big wall. They're going to stop presenting. You're going to draw on that big wall and listen to the conversation they're saying and capture it visually. And I thought, that sounds like normal. Yeah. And I went up there and they started talking, and they were talking English, but they weren't talking real English. Do you know what I mean? So I was like, oh, no. What's happening to me? I froze. It wasn't like the hip-hop guys that did the freeze thing. My brain was actually freezing. And what was happening was the Brodmann 46 was an area of your brain here. It's about sustaining memory and gluing that with emotion to a memory. And visual scribes can do this. We normally can do this a lot. We can hold information in our heads and fly it around and then draw. But today, because this was the first time that I'd ever done this, it wasn't working for me. And the Brodmann 46 as well, in the brain, is something to do with your impulse control. And it's a referee, it's the judgment. And a referee popped up in my brain and went, "Stop! Just calm down, just freeze. And I was like, I don't know what to do. They're talking all weird, and I was dropping pen lids and sweating. And I thought, right, if I've learned anything from art college at all, anything, is if you get a creative block, just draw something. So I started drawing. And about an hour later, I'd had this swathe of information that I'd managed to draw. And it probably made no sense to them or me at the time, but the client came up to me, "That's great. No, that's brilliant." And I just thought, what's this about? This is an insane cult I've joined. And is this a parlour trick, a gimmick? And they were like, "No, you're a knowledge worker." And I thought, "No, I'm an idiot savant." So for me, the lack of context that's in this environment coming from, the windswept artist thing, was I thought, what can a bunch of creatives really teach me, an artist, about creativity? Well, it turns out they can teach me quite a bit. The accountant's firm bought this methodology from a really talented architect called Matt Taylor and his wife, Gail, who was an educationalist. Now, Matt, he had been a student of Frank Lloyd Wright, and Frank Lloyd Wright had built the Guggenheim. And she was a Montessori school teacher, and what they realized is at the end of the 20th century, there was a whole lot of stuff going down. We're probably used to it by now, but the onslaught of the information age was coming up upon us pretty fast. And there was the backlash of the Cold War. There was also massive discrepancies between the rich and the poor. Emerging markets were happening, and also resources. There was a massive drain on the world's resources. So the Taylors thought, the rate of change, this is not going to change. And in hindsight, we can see that it hasn't. It's got even worse. The amount of information that we are prone to today is, from an event to the feedback of the event, the lag in between that is almost real time. Twitter's a really good example of this. So what they said was, well, what do we want to do about this impending change? How are we going to deal with this? So they created a process that was all about creating massive feedback loops. So it would teach large groups of people to be able to deal with this change. And what they were doing, and this was fascinating, was they would teach people about organic systems like coral reefs and rainforests, and they'd also talk about altruistic animals like wolves that would sacrifice themselves for the good of pack. There was fast teams like pit crews, Roman Empire, a decentralized model. All of this stuff was all to do with complexity science. And for me, this is what the accountants actually taught me about being an artist, was they connected my artistic mind with this networked knowledge economy. And this blew me away. This was like, whoa, I've been given the keys to the castle. Because really, this knowledge economy was not based on land, and it wasn't based on capital like the Industrial Revolution. It was actually based on something new. And that thing was people. And people have intellectual capital. And the thing about people and their intellectual capital is they tend to want to leave at the end of the day. They walk out of the building. And because they're a dynamic and mobile resource. But what the Taylors thought about was, hold on a minute, we can capitalize on this. Why don't we get these people like artists, writers, musicians, creatives, teachers, ex-military, basically anyone that could turn up and actually take part in these big knowledge environments. And so what do we learn and how do we learn? And it's interesting this. I was looking at my son the other day, Oscar, and children learn intuitively. He picked up some Lego, he loves Lego, he's obsessed with it. And he was putting stuff together, and I didn't need to teach him anything about putting Lego together, he was just picking it up and playing with it. And he built this rat trap. He said, "Daddy, I built a rat trap." It was brilliant. A little thing goes around and it smacks the rat, and it wasn't a rat, it was a Lego brick. And interestingly, I said, well, what do you think of that? He went, I saw that on Home Alone, traps. And I thought, well, interestingly, when I was preparing for this talk, I thought, here's how things get connected up, you see. Anyone get the connection yet? Home Alone, Macaulay Culkin. Who knew? But adults learn in a very different way. Adults learn socially. They very much to do with hierarchies of learning, and there's a stress associated with this. It's oh, is it important? What's in it for me? Is it all right? And adults are also, because they often work in hierarchical structures, have big bosses that tell them off. So there's stress involved in learning, and also the hierarchies. What people want to do is it safe? Am I all right? Can I learn? It's not just picking up Lego and playing with it. It's, is it all right? So these environments that the Taylors have created use a thing called scribing, which was what I ended up doing. And scribes are great. It's a modelling language that models behaviour. And if you see a big hairy hand like me drawing on a wall, you think, hey, it's safe for me to go and draw on the walls too, and that's really good. The other things that scribing do for people is people really love to see that their voices are captured, and this generates participation. It generates feedback also, because people say, he captured what I said, but I didn't actually mean it like that. So, and then it gives them a chance to augment what they actually meant. Because when you're capturing and distilling information in real time, it does a number of things. And as I said before, it concentrates on the information, it focuses really on the information and not about the personality connected to that information. So if your boss is banging his chest saying, that's my idea, it's not about that. It's about the information becomes king. So everyone can build maps of learning and knowledge from that. So this is really good because ideas can build on themselves and people can actually see what's being said. We also use, scribing uses metaphor a lot, and metaphor, we all use metaphor all the time. And what metaphors are basically a way of us translating. So translation is key to what the hip-hop boys talked about, which is the multiple intelligences. We translate from one intelligence to another. Now, Howard Gardner, when he developed this theory, it's not, intelligence isn't based on something you can just do with IQ tests. It's a whole range of things, a whole range of intelligences, linguistic, logical, musical, etc. Now, I'm going to make a Coke reference, and I feel really guilty about this now, based on the talk earlier on. It's not about the drink, it's about the process of getting the drink to market. So, when I was doing live scribing at the Ernst & Young OCD headquarters, it was about live scribing, it was about group generation of information and everything like that. Now, what happens is that's great, it deals with multiple intelligences and everyone gets a job done in that environment. But how do you get that information out there? Now, what we realised was, it took me a long time to work this out, was if we could bottle that information, then we can get it to more people. So the model is that Coca-Cola, you can only have one hit in the restaurant, but if you bottle it, you can send it out to everyone. But I'm not endorsing Coca-Cola here. I know it's bad for you. So what am I doing with all this anyway? I'm dealing with a lot of multiple intelligences, even within one intelligence, which is the visual and spatial intelligence. Firstly, you're hearing me talk and you're seeing words come up on the screen. Secondly, I'm organising information in space. As you can see, when we pull back, you can see we've gone through all the quality destinations of the world, Margate, Luton, everything. And then, you know. So there's also the kinesthetic aspect, which is when you see your big hairy hand drawing on the screen, what you're doing is you're following that hand. And when mirror neurons are fired, and what happens is, when you see that happen, you think you're learning from that. So whenever I think about all of this stuff, I go back to the cave in Let's Go. And cave painting and the shaman involved were about transforming consciousness. Scribes in ancient Egypt were about recording information. Medieval craftsmen, they were just about making good stuff, crafts. The Renaissance was about being in service of the church. The royal court artists were about in service of authority. As we know, the Romantics were about art for art's sake. And when we arrive at Oscar Wilde that says all art is quite useless. And as I've said, I don't really agree with that. So I want to leave you with a quote from, sorry, I have to do this, my Brodmann 46 is just broken. I have to read from there, I can't read that. It's a quote from Paul Schrader, who was the guy that wrote Taxi Driver. He said, "Art works. Art is functional and a functional device. To expose and eliminate one's own problems and put them in perspective and learn more about yourself and others, art is functional. It's as functional as a tool belt. It is not a plaything. It is not a diversion. It is not something you do when you don't have anything better to do. It is work." So my call to arms is, how can we put artists and art to work for the better good of people? Thank you.